ADHD can look different from person to person. Some people may recognize certain patterns in how they focus, think, or respond to their environment. In this part of the video, we will look more closely at a few of these experiences. These aren't the same for everyone, and they're not always strengths or challenges on their own, but they are ways of understanding how ADHD may show up depending on the person, the context, and the supports in place. One experience someone with ADHD might describe is hyperfocus, which can happen when something feels especially interesting or important. In some situations, this can support sustained attention, creativity, and productivity, especially when the task is meaningful or engaging. In other situations, it can make it difficult to shift attention, stop a task, or respond to other expectations. Some people with ADHD describe experiencing creativity in different ways. This can include making connections quickly, generating new ideas, or approaching tasks from a different perspective. Sometimes, this way of thinking can support problem solving, innovation, and creative expression. In some situations, it can feel harder to organize ideas, follow a structured process, or finish a project. Some people with ADHD describe having high levels of energy. This can show up as a need to move, talk, or stay actively engaged with what's happening around them. In some situations, this energy can support enthusiasm, engagement, and active participation, especially in dynamic or interactive environments. At other times, it can feel harder to stay still, regulate activity levels, or match the expectations of the environment. Some people with ADHD describe being more willing to try new things or act quickly in the moment. In some situations, this can support exploration, creativity, and a willingness to take initiative or approach new opportunities. In other situations, it may lead to acting without enough time to think things through or taking risks that have unintended consequences. This can also be connected to how the brain manages impulse control and decision-making in the moment. Some people with ADHD describe experiencing emotions deeply and being highly aware of how others are feeling. Sometimes this can support empathy, connection, and strong relationships with others. In other situations, it may feel harder to take a step back, manage emotional responses, or see a situation from different perspectives. Experiences of empathy in ADHD can vary and may include strong emotional awareness alongside differences in understanding other people's perspectives. Some people with ADHD describe thinking in broader or more connected ways, often seeing patterns or relationships between ideas. In some situations, this can support big picture thinking, creativity, and the ability to generate new ideas or make connections across topics. In other situations, it can feel harder to focus on details, follow step-by-step processes, or organize ideas in a structured way. This way of thinking can also be connected to how the brain processes information and makes associations between ideas. Across all of these experiences, ADHD is complex, and it looks different for each person. The same patterns can feel helpful in some situations and more challenging in others. That is why understanding ADHD matters. It allows us to move beyond labels and focus on what each person needs to learn, work, and even thrive. With the right supports, environments, and relationships, individuals with ADHD can better understand themselves and how they learn. Ultimately, the goal is not to define ADHD in one way, but to support meaningful understanding across different contexts.